Growing up in the Henderson family meant following a very specific blueprint. My father, Robert, was a respected banker who wore his three-piece suits like armor. My mother, Patricia, was the perfect socialite wife who organized charity galas and spoke in whispers about proper behavior. My older brother Marcus was their golden child, valedictorian, Harvard graduate, and now a successful corporate lawyer. Then there was my sister Emily, the family princess who married into old money and lived in a mansion on the right side of town. And then there was me, Alex Henderson, the family disappointment. While they discussed stock portfolios over Sunday dinner, I sketched cartoon characters in my notebook. When they attended opera performances, I snuck out to underground music venues. My parents' friends would ask about their children with pride, but when my name came up, I'd watch my mother's smile falter slightly before she changed the subject. The breaking point came during my high school graduation. I had been accepted to art school on a partial scholarship, something I was genuinely excited about. But when I announced it at our family dinner, the silence was deafening. My father set down his fork with deliberate precision and said, "Art school? Alex, we've discussed this. You need a real career, not some hobby that will leave you living in our basement at 30. Marcus chimed in with his usual condescending tone, "Come on, Alex. Be practical. You could still apply to business school. I have connections." Emily just shook her head like I was a lost cause. "I don't understand why you always have to be so different. Why can't you just be normal like everyone else?" That word, normal, hit me like a physical blow. Normal meant conforming to their expectations, suppressing my creativity, and becoming another cookie-cutter version of success. Normal meant giving up on everything that made me feel alive. "Maybe I don't want to be normal," I replied, my voice steadier than I felt. "Maybe I want to create something meaningful instead of just making money." My father's face reddened. "Meaningful? You think what I do isn't meaningful? This family's success didn't come from chasing dreams, Alex. It came from hard work and smart decisions." That night, I overheard my parents talking in their bedroom. My mother's voice carried through the thin walls. "I don't know where we went wrong with him, Robert. He's nothing like Marcus or Emily. Sometimes I wonder if he's even our child." Those words shattered something inside me. The next morning, I packed my bags and left for art school without another word. I didn't ask for their financial support, didn't expect their blessing, and didn't look back when I walked out that door. The first year was brutal. I worked 3 part-time jobs to pay for tuition and rent in a tiny studio apartment that smelled like paint and desperation. I survived on instant noodles and the occasional care package from my grandmother, the only family member who still spoke to me. But every rejection letter, every exhausting double shift, every night I fell asleep at my easel was fuel for my determination. I was done being the black sheep. I was ready to prove them all wrong. Art school was nothing like I had imagined. The romantic notion of starving artists creating masterpieces in candlelit studios was quickly replaced by the harsh reality of technical assignments, brutal critiques, and the constant pressure to stand out among hundreds of other talented students. My professor, Dr. Elena Vasquez, was a former gallery owner who had a reputation for breaking students' spirits in the first semester. During my first critique, she stood before my painting, a piece I had poured my heart into, and simply said, "Competent, but forgettable. Art isn't about being good, Mr. Henderson. It's about being necessary." Those words haunted me for weeks. While my classmates seemed to effortlessly produce innovative pieces, I felt like I was copying shadows of greater artists. Every phone call home was a reminder of my family's disappointment. My grandmother would update me on family news. Marcus made partner at his firm, Emily was expecting her second child, and my parents had stopped mentioning my name at social gatherings. The turning point came during my second year, in the most unexpected way. I was working a late shift at a 24-hour diner, serving coffee to insomniacs and night shift workers, when I noticed something extraordinary. The fluorescent lights cast harsh shadows on tired faces, creating a raw beauty that no gallery painting could capture. I started sketching on napkins, the exhausted nurse finishing her shift, the taxi driver counting his tips, the student cramming for exams with textbooks spread across a greasy table. These weren't the polished subjects of classical art. These were real people living real lives, and their stories were written in the lines of their faces, the slump of their shoulders, the way they stirred their coffee. I realized that Dr. Vasquez was right. Art needed to be necessary, and these people's stories were necessary. I began a project called The Night Shift, a series of paintings that captured the invisible workforce that kept the city running while others slept. I painted the janitor who cleaned office buildings and dreamed of opening his own restaurant. I painted the emergency room doctor who saved lives while battling her own demons. I painted the security guard who wrote poetry during his rounds. Each painting was a collaboration. I would talk to my subjects, learn their stories, understand their dreams and fears. My art became a bridge between their world and mine, and for the first time, I felt like I was creating something meaningful. The series caught the attention of a local gallery owner, Maria Santos, who offered me a small exhibition in her gallery's side room. It wasn't much, just a corner space with minimal lighting, but it was my first real show. I invited my family, knowing they probably wouldn't come, but hoping that maybe, just maybe, they would see what I was trying to do. The opening night was modest but memorable. About 30 people showed up, including several of my painting subjects and their families. The janitor brought his wife and kids. The emergency room doctor came straight from her shift, still wearing scrubs. As I watched people connecting with my work, sharing their own stories, I felt a sense of purpose I had never experienced. My family didn't come. But something else happened that night that would change everything. A woman in an expensive coat spent nearly an hour studying my paintings. She didn't speak to anyone, just observed with the intense focus of someone who understood art on a deeper level. As she was leaving, she handed me her business card. Vivian Cross, art consultant, it read. I represent several high-profile collectors. Your work has something most contemporary art lacks, soul. Call me when you're ready to take this seriously. Standing in that small gallery, surrounded by the people whose stories I had painted, holding a business card that might change my life, I realized something profound. I wasn't the black sheep anymore. I was exactly who I was meant to be. Vivian Cross was unlike anyone I had ever met. She wore her silver hair in a severe bun, spoke in measured tones, and had the kind of presence that commanded attention without effort. When I called her the week after my gallery showing, she invited me to her penthouse office overlooking the city. The art world is brutal, she told me, pouring tea from an elegant china set. Talent is common. What's rare is the ability to touch people's souls while maintaining commercial viability. Your Night Shift series does both. She offered to represent me, but with conditions. I would need to produce a larger body of work, develop a consistent style, and be prepared for the politics and pressures of the art world. Most importantly, I would need to trust her completely. Over the next 18 months, I worked harder than I ever had in my life. Vivian connected me with collectors, critics, and curators who were looking for authentic voices in contemporary art. My work evolved from the raw documentation of The Night Shift to more sophisticated pieces that still maintain their emotional core. I developed a technique that combined traditional oil painting with mixed media elements, incorporating actual objects from my subjects' lives into the paintings. A piece about a construction worker included fragments of brick and steel. A portrait of a teacher incorporated pages from worn textbooks. Critics began calling it narrative realism, and the name stuck. Meanwhile, my personal life remained complicated. I was dating Sarah, a fellow artist I had met at school, but my increasing success was creating tension between us. She accused me of selling out, of abandoning the pure artistic vision we had shared as struggling students. When Vivian arranged my first major solo exhibition at the prestigious Whitmore Gallery, Sarah and I had a devastating fight. "You're becoming everything we used to mock," she said, tears streaming down her face. "Those rich people buying your paintings don't understand what your work really means. They're just collecting trophies." Her words stung because there was truth in them. I was making more money than I had ever imagined, but I was also compromising in ways that made me uncomfortable. Vivian had started suggesting subjects that would appeal to certain collectors, and I found myself painting less from passion and more from market demand. The Whitmore Gallery exhibition was a massive success. 23 paintings sold on opening night, including a piece that went for $85,000. Art critics called it a breakthrough moment for contemporary narrative art. The gallery owner, Richard Whitmore, hinted at future collaborations and international exhibitions. But the real validation came from an unexpected source. Dr. Vasquez, my former professor, attended the opening. She studied my work with the same intensity she had shown in her critiques, and when she approached me, I braced myself for another brutal assessment. "You found your voice," she said simply. "These paintings are necessary." The success brought opportunities one had never dreamed of. Museums began acquiring my work. I was invited to speak at conferences and universities. Magazine profiles featured my story as an example of perseverance and artistic integrity. Yet something was missing. The more successful I became, the more isolated I felt. My old friends from art school seemed intimidated by my success. My family remained distant, though I had heard through my grandmother that they were aware of my achievements. And Sarah had moved to another city, leaving me to navigate my new world alone. The isolation deepened when I moved into an upscale apartment in the arts district. My neighbors were successful professionals who knew my name from magazine articles but had no interest in knowing me as a person. I found myself missing the authentic connections I had made during my struggling years. One evening, while working on a new piece, I received a call that would change everything. It was Marcus, my brother, calling for the first time in 4 years. "Alex." His voice was hesitant, almost vulnerable. "I saw your piece in Art Monthly. That painting of the night janitor. It reminded me of Dad's first job. Did you know he used to clean offices before he got into banking?" I didn't know. My parents had never shared those details of their past with me. As Marcus continued talking, I realized that my success had created an opening for reconciliation, but I wasn't sure if I was ready to walk through it. The art world had accepted me, but the question remained, was I ready to face the family that had rejected me? Marcus's call opened a floodgate of memories I had tried to suppress. Our conversation revealed family history I had never known, my father's humble beginnings, my mother's struggles with perfectionism, the pressure they had felt to maintain appearances in their social circle. But it also revealed something more troubling. My family's sudden interest in reconnecting seemed directly tied to my financial success. "Mom keeps all your magazine articles," Marcus confided during one of our increasingly frequent phone calls. "She shows them to her friends. She's proud of you, Alex. She just doesn't know how to say it." I wanted to believe him, but years of rejection had built walls around my heart. When he suggested I come to Emily's birthday party, I agreed, partly out of curiosity and partly because I missed having a family, even an imperfect one. The party was held at Emily's estate, a sprawling property that screamed old money and good taste. I arrived in my new BMW, a purchase that had felt like a small victory when I bought it, but now seemed like a symbol of how much I had changed. My family's reaction was a mixture of surprise and carefully concealed calculation. "Alex." Emily embraced me with enthusiasm that seemed genuine but rehearsed. "You look amazing. Success suits you." My parents' greeting was more reserved but warmer than I had expected. My mother actually complimented my suit, and my father asked about my work with what seemed like genuine interest. But I noticed the way they introduced me to their friends. "This is our son Alex, the artist. You might have seen his work in the Times." The evening was pleasant but surreal. I was back in the world I had rejected, but now I was being celebrated for succeeding in the world I had chosen. The cognitive dissonance was overwhelming. Things became clearer when Marcus pulled me aside for a private conversation. "Alex, I need to be honest with you about something," he said, his lawyer's training evident in his careful word choice. "Emily's husband's business is in trouble. The real estate market has been brutal, and they're facing some serious financial challenges." I felt my stomach drop. "And you're telling me this because?" "Because family helps family," he said, but his eyes couldn't meet mine. "You're doing incredibly well, and Emily's too proud to ask, but you're asking for her," I finished. "How much?" The number he mentioned was staggering, more than I had ever imagined anyone in my family would need. It wasn't just help, it was a rescue operation for their lifestyle. The conversation was interrupted by my mother approaching with a couple I didn't recognize. "Alex, I want you to meet the Thorntons. They're art collectors and I thought you might like to meet them." As I shook hands with the Thorntons, I realized what was happening. My family wasn't just reconnecting with me, they were networking me. I was no longer the black sheep, I was their access to a world they wanted to enter. The revelation hit me like a physical blow. All the warmth, the pride, the sudden acceptance, it was conditional. It was based on my success, my connections, my ability to provide what they needed. I excused myself and stepped onto the terrace, needing air and space to process what I had discovered. Sarah's words echoed in my mind. "Those rich people buying your paintings don't understand what your work really means." But now I realized my own family might be guilty of the same thing. My grandmother found me there, sitting alone on a bench overlooking Emily's perfectly manicured garden. At 92, she was the only family member who had never stopped talking to me, never stopped believing in me. "They're not bad people, Alex," she said, sitting beside me with the careful movements of someone who had learned to be gentle with her aging body. "They're just scared people who made mistakes and don't know how to fix them. They want money, Grandma. They want connections. They don't want me." "Maybe," she said, patting my hand with her weathered fingers. "But maybe that's just where they're starting. Sometimes people need a reason to love someone before they remember they already do." Her words were kind, but I wasn't sure if I believed them. As I drove home that night, I realized I had a choice to make. I could retreat back into the safety of my success, or I could find a way to navigate this complicated reunion on my own terms. But first, I needed to understand what my family truly wanted from me, and what I was willing to give. The weeks following Emily's party were a masterclass in manipulation disguised as family bonding. My mother called weekly, always finding ways to mention my important friends, and how proud she was of my connections. Marcus shared investment opportunities that would benefit from my artistic credibility. Emily invited me to gallery openings where she could introduce me to her social circle. But it was my father who delivered the most honest conversation. He appeared at my apartment one evening, unannounced and visibly uncomfortable. This was the man who had once told me I needed a real career, standing in my art studio surrounded by paintings worth more than his annual salary. "Your mother doesn't know I'm here," he said, studying a portrait I had painted of a homeless veteran. "She thinks I'm at a business dinner." We sat in my living room, two men who had spent years not understanding each other, finally ready to have a real conversation. "I owe you an apology," he said, his voice heavy with something I had never heard from him before, vulnerability. "When you left for art school, I thought I was protecting you from failure. I didn't want you to struggle like I did." This was the first time I had heard about his struggles. He told me about cleaning offices at night while attending business school during the day, about the shame he felt when colleagues discovered his working-class background, about the pressure to reinvent himself to fit into the banking world. "I was so afraid of being seen as not good enough that I tried to make all of you bulletproof," he continued. "I thought if you all succeeded in traditional ways, you'd never face the rejection I faced." "But I did face rejection," I said. "From my own family." He nodded, tears in his eyes. "I know. And I've regretted it every day since you left." The conversation could have ended there, with apologies and reconciliation. But then he mentioned Emily's financial problems, and I realized that even this moment of honesty was leading somewhere specific. "She's about to lose everything, Alex. The house, the kids' schools, their whole life. And I don't have the resources to help her." The ask was implicit but clear. I had the resources. I had the connections. I had the ability to save my sister's lifestyle. "What if I can't help her?" I asked. His answer revealed everything. "Then I guess we'll understand if you can't be part of the family." The ultimatum was delivered with the skill of someone who had spent decades in negotiations, but it was an ultimatum nonetheless. My acceptance back into the family was conditional on my ability to solve their problems. I spent the next week in a state of emotional paralysis. I had the money to help Emily, but giving it to her would confirm that my value to the family was purely financial. Refusing would mean losing them again, just when I thought I might get them back. The answer came from an unexpected source. Dr. Vasquez invited me to speak at a conference about art and social responsibility. As I prepared my presentation, I realized I had been asking the wrong question. The question wasn't whether my family loved me for who I was or what I could provide. The question was whether I could love them for who they were, flawed, conditional, and human. I called a family meeting at my apartment. They all came, probably expecting me to announce my decision about Emily's situation. Instead, I unveiled a new painting I had been working on, a family portrait that showed them exactly as they were, my father, tired and trying to protect his children the only way he knew how, my mother, desperate to maintain a perfect image, Marcus, trapped in the success he had been programmed to achieve, Emily, drowning in the lifestyle she thought she wanted. And in the center, myself, no longer the black sheep, but not quite belonging either. "I'll help Emily," I said, watching their faces fill with relief. "But not in the way you expect." Instead of giving them money, I offered something more valuable. I used my connections to help Emily's husband find new investors for his business. I arranged for Marcus to meet art collectors who needed legal representation. I helped my mother organize a charity auction featuring emerging artists, giving her the social recognition she craved. Most importantly, I set boundaries. I would be part of the family, but on my own terms. I would help when I could, but I wouldn't be their permanent solution to every problem. The reunion wasn't perfect. There were still tensions, still moments when I felt like an outsider. But there was also something I had never experienced before, a family relationship based on mutual benefit rather than one-sided sacrifice. 6 months later, I received an invitation that made me laugh out loud. Emily was hosting a dinner party, and the invitation read, "Come celebrate our family's resident black sheep, who turned out to be the golden goose." I almost didn't go. But then I realized something profound. Being the black sheep had never been about being different. It had been about being authentic in a family that valued appearance over truth. Now, finally I was both. And that was enough. As I drove to Emily's house that evening, I thought about the journey that had brought me here. I had left seeking acceptance and found success. I had gained everything I thought I wanted and discovered it wasn't enough. But in the end, I had learned the most important lesson of all. Sometimes the family you get isn't the family you need, but with enough love and boundaries, it can become the family you choose. The black sheep had come home, not because I had changed, but because I had finally learned to be myself in a world that had always demanded I be someone else. And that, I realized, was the real success story.